days in Vegas, we got stuck in the desert, and we had a little hangover remix out there, man.
I wore a wig to school once, and they said no headgear was allowed.
How did
spider web
was it
tights.
Obvious that it was a wig?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was having
a terrible
fun.
wig.
See, this is exactly why we have them on the show, and this is what makes them fun.
You're listening to KXVS, the voice of Stockton, 92.1 FM.
This is Barbara Berrigan-Perea with Delta Flows, a radio show by the voice of Stockton and Restore the Delta. This is the weekly radio show where we discuss everything Delta related: the environment, water management, water quality, farming, history and culture, public events, recreation, Delta food, and the arts. Tune into Delta Flows on KXVS, the voice of Stockton, streaming live on Facebook and YouTube at KXVS Radio.
KXVS, the voice of Stockton, live. The voice of Stockton at Stone Soup Studio. KXVS.org.
The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of KXVS, the voice of Stockton, or its parents, affiliates, management, and staff. KXVS, the voice of Stockton, presents Connections, Peace and Justice Radio, with your hosts, Bruce Giudici and Christie Kelley.
Good evening. This evening we are going to be discussing and looking at the most recent issue of Connections newspaper, the April-May edition, which is the Earth Day edition. And with us tonight is Christie Kelley, who always goes through Connections with us because she just loves this paper.
That's what I do.
You know, and just read enough of it. And this is the Earth Day issue. Today is April 9th, and so we have about a little over a week to go to the April 22nd date. We just came from a very lively organizing meeting, which is real good. We've been getting together every Monday since the beginning of the year and getting excited about Earth Day Festival. It's the 30th annual Earth Day Festival at Victory Park, Sunday, April 22nd. From the festival itself is from 11 to 4. The March for Science is going to start at 11 and go to, it's going to start at 10 and go till 11. It's going to start at the stage. And before that, some yoga action at 9 o'clock. So it's going to be a real full day. It doesn't cost you a dime to go there. The entertainment is local and great. We have vegetarian food and about 60 or 65 vendor booths that are going to be out there doing a lot of interactive stuff for kids.
Yeah,
and
they're not trying to sell you a bill of goods
No.
in any way. You can go and do all kinds of activities, and kids can take things home, and
Yeah.
adults can learn ways to work with their kids around how to preserve our earth.
Yeah. So real practical things, and it's a lot of fun, and this is the 30th annual one, so it's got to be good if it's lasted that long, right? So anyway, so we'll be discussing that in a second, but so this newspaper is the environmental issue, but there's a lot of other stuff in this paper, and so what we would like to do is just start at the back.
We're going to start at the back.
Because what also happened while we were putting this paper together was the March for Our Lives, the student-led march against gun violence. And we had a March for Our Lives here in Stockton.
And it was a great march. On March 24th, which was after the March 14th, which was the high schools had march-ins, or they had walk-ins or walk-outs.
Yeah, in the middle of school.
In the middle of school. And then on the 24th, the community came out, and we all marched together and expressed our frustration with gun laws in this country and the amount of violence that is happening. It was extremely well organized. Some wonderful speeches were made by young people and beautiful poetry and raps, and it was a fantastic event. But that led to what's on page 18, which was a brief ad for folks who got their paper in time about an organizer training. And that organizer training had been planned in advance of all this, but there were several kids from Edison High School who attended that. The first time that the David Hunt and Associates Midwest organizer trainers had ever taught youth. And it was a 2-day workshop, which was incredible for all the folks that attended. And folks attended from Little Manila, San Joaquin Pride Center, Restore the Delta, Sow a Seed, representative from 350 Stockton, Peace and Justice, and then all kinds of other local organizing or local community groups. And we spent 2 days talking about how to focus direct action events, how to really make sure what you're doing is going to be effective and you'll win. So we have lots of celebrations. So we had a celebration on the 24th with the kids, the community doing that march. That was a great coming together of the community. The folks that came together at this organizer training have learned some incredibly good skills, and I really look forward to seeing how this is implemented in the community as people begin to get involved in more direct action activities.
So when you're talking about direct action, is this like marching or like sit-ins or like going even say to council meetings, or what sort of direct action did they talk about and how did they train people to?
So I'm shaking my head yes to everything you're saying. The deal is you choose your issue. What's your issue? So it could be anything.
Yeah, say it's gun violence.
So it's gun violence. So then
I'm sure that was one of the issues that was brought up at this
right,
training.
And it's something that affects people's lives.
Yeah,
it's very visible. You want to give people a sense that they have power, because what we've forgotten is that we have power as a community. One by one, yeah, we can write letters, we can make phone calls, but as a large group, we have a whole lot more power. And we're often told that we don't. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But yeah.
Definitely encouraged. I mean, I'm going door to door these days, campaigning and talking to folks, and it seems like there are some people who do take that power personally, and they do realize that they're engaged. But then there are a lot of folks who are they sort of shake their head or say yeah, ask them if they're going to vote. No, they're not going to vote, and say why not? Well, it doesn't make a difference.
Right. So maybe even voter registration.
Right. To
make sure people register and then get out the vote.
Right.
So you would identify that issue, and then you would set your goals. So what is your long range goal? What is your intermediate goal for that campaign? Then you talk about what your organization can do. What are some of the things that you need to do as an organization to make that happen? Then you'd identify your allies and your opponents, and what can each of those people get out of what's going to happen? What will your opponents be looking for? Be aware of who your opponents are. And then who are your target? Who's your target? And how are you going to get to that target? And then what tactics will you use? And so we spent the 2 days breaking out into small groups and organizing around a make-believe community that had pollution. And we broke out 4 times, working a little bit more, going deeper and deeper into our organizational skills, practicing them. And by the end of the 2 days, we were a pretty amazing group of people, ready to go out and organize.
Yeah, because I think, it is important to folks who are your opponents to make you feel like you as an individual can't do anything yourself. I mean, I'm only one person. That's the typical battle cry.
Right.
And it's in your opponent's best interest to keep you thinking that you are only an individual, that you can't do anything individually. And unless you are an exceptional person, it is difficult for one person to do something. But as part of a group, people can become exceptional, for one thing. And then also that group can be very strong and powerful.
Right.
It's like pulling in the same direction. Or, you have a tug of war, you have one person on one end of the rope, yeah, you're going to get tugged down. But if you have a lot of people pulling in the same direction, it can be really strong.
Exactly, and that's what it was all about. So in the end, the last part of it was forming coalitions. So who in the community can work with you on this? And so that's flexible, that can change at times, but being conscious about how you make those decisions. And direct action is what you take when everything else has failed.
Mm-hmm.
So direct action, the students walking in or walking out,
Right.
the community walking out, sit-ins, boycotts, all those things are when you've tried everything else and nobody's listening, you make sure they start listening. And what reminds me of is the grape boycott back in the day.
Right.
You know, people stopped buying grapes and they stopped buying head lettuce, and it made big changes for people who worked in the fields at that time.
Right. And
So, yeah, that was a great, I really wanted to start at the last page with that.
Yeah, because that's part of what Connections tries to do, is it tries to draw information to issues that need people to pull in the same direction.
And we'd love to hear from people. Always, we want local input. What are you doing? What's going on with your group? What are your concerns, and where are you in your struggle?
Right. So on the back page again of the paper, we do have notice here. I mean, I just mentioned the Earth Day celebration that's happening here in Stockton on April 22nd from 11 to 4 in Victory Park in Stockton. But there's also an Earth Day celebration that's happening up in Angels Camp that I'm associated with and have worked with before on the same day. So if you're going to be up in the foothills from 11 to 6 up at Utica Park in Angels Camp, Clan Dyken will be playing up there as well as a lot of other local musical groups that the area really is really strong in. And one thing that they have there, and we don't really have in our place, is we have there at the Calaveras Earth Day, there's a free cycle event. And it's a real nice idea that you bring stuff that you can't use that's around your house, that's gently used, and you just put it out there and for somebody else to pick up for free. We
should do that next year.
So it's sort of like a flea market,
yeah,
but
free.
There's no prices. The problem is you don't want to have a whole lot of stuff left over that you're ending up having to. Well, I guess you could still take it to Salvation Army and that
find
sort of
out
thing.
what they do with it.
Right. Well, the thing is that at Calaveras County, it just disappears. It's just gone.
I think that's what would happen here.
Yeah, and so if you have a coat or some clothes or a pair
I have
of
a
skis
hose,
or
a garden hose that's perfectly fine. I just don't want it anymore.
That's right. Yeah, it's something that's wrapped or whatever. Or my favorite is books. If you have an environmental book or a science book that you can bring, come on up to the Free Cycle event up in Calaveras County. You can drop something off, pick something up, and it's a lot of fun. And it's a different vibe up there than the one down here. The Stockton Earth Day Festival is more, I would say, just more educational. There's just a lot more information for you, whereas the Earth Day celebration up in Angels Camp is just a real celebration of the Earth, and it's just a lot of fun. So
there's a march on Friday, May 11th, up at the Capitol Mall. Delta Smelt Strong.
Yep.
The Delta Smelt is kind of the canary in the coal mine. They're really important to the ecosystem, and if that smelt disappears, a lot of other things will fall because that is part of the food chain.
Yeah, and it's also an indicator that, like you say, in the canary in the coal mine, it's an indicator species that the environment or the habitat is in bad shape. Because in terms of not the low oxygen levels in the delta in the summertime, or delta flows water's being sucked down into the aqueduct and sent down south to farm cotton and alfalfa and crops that can be farmed more economically elsewhere. We're pretty much destroying our delta habitat. And so there is going to be on a Friday, May 11th, again a march up in Sacramento, meeting at the California EPA office at 1001 I Street, and then marching to the Capitol. And so it's a rally for the environment and for our delta. And right now, this is the year of decision for the delta tunnels. We have a governor who is dead set on getting these tunnels passed, and I just read in the local record, which we should, every local paper we should all support, because we're losing our local papers by the day. read in the record that the Metropolitan Water District down in LA is thinking, oh yeah, maybe 2 tunnels would be a good idea, and we could pay for that, and then we could sell the water to the farmers if they don't want to come up with the big money to finance this twin tunnel thing. Private water. Well, they've already bought a big island here to essentially be the staging ground for their water supply, and as a place where they can store the tailings from the dig to build the tunnels. It is just it's something that we really have to take action on, because we have, like I said, there's 6 or 7 more months of this governor that we're going to have. All of the Democratic candidates for governor are against the tunnels, so we won't have a governor anymore. Going into next year, we won't have a governor who is pushing for tunnels. And so now is the time to mobilize against this, and it's a big environmental issue in the Delta.
So should we go to page 2?
So we should go to page 2. And so on page 2, we're talking about that crazy editor always has his piece in here, but talking about Dreamers again. Right now, we've covered Dreamers, the DACA recipients in this paper for the past, it seems like, a couple years, and I think the issue has been alive for at least a decade. And now, after our dear president has gotten rid of DACA protections and said that there had to be legislation to replace DACA by, I believe it was the beginning of March, or people are going to start being deported, the courts decided that that was too extreme of a move, and they did not allow Trump's executive order to take place. So there's still a holding pattern of trying to get some legislation happening that will protect the Dreamers, the folks who don't have papers, who were born here when they were who were brought over here when they were really young, and now they don't have papers, and so they could be deported to countries they don't even recognize or understand. So,
and there is contact for the Friends Committee on National Legislation, where you can get more information, and this is an important one to keep putting pressure on elected officials.
Yeah, and the Friends are really good at this. The Quakers are excellent on this issue. There's also a article here on the continued pushing for new nuclear testing, or new testing of devices to make nuclear weapons more usable, tactical nuclear weapons as they're called. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to be tactical with a nuclear weapon.
Indeed. So the thing is that now we have, over here at Livermore Lab, where it's just where they test the devices that use to trigger off the nuclear weapons. There's new funding coming along so that these new smaller nuclear weapons can be developed, and with the idea that somehow they could be more useful than the huge ones that were really designed never to be used. And so it's a very scary thing. For one thing, it's a huge waste of money, and the second thing is that if they're ever used, we might as well just kiss it goodbye. So this is a good article. It talks about of what you can do to get in contact with Tri-Valley Cares, which is an excellent organization over in Livermore. They work on protesting a lot of the testing that does happen out there at Site 300.
And there will be an action on Monday, August 6th at 8 a.m.
Yep. That's the Hiroshima Nagasaki commemoration, and so that would be August 6th would be Hiroshima Day, and Nagasaki Day would be August 9th. And so every year they have a commemoration out there to remember and remember never again. So that is that. On page 3.
We have the Parkland Students Manifesto, and the Parkland students were those students in Florida, where 17 students died due to gun violence, and they've written a very good manifesto on how to fix America's Gun laws. I'll just read the headings, but the changes they propose are to ban semi-automatic weapons that fire high-velocity rounds, ban accessories that simulate automatic weapons, establish a database of gun sales and universal background checks, change privacy laws to allow mental health care providers to communicate with law enforcement, close gun show and secondhand sales loopholes, allow the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to make recommendations for gun reform. Right now, they're not allowed to conduct research.
Right.
And raise the firearm purchase to age 21, dedicate more funds to mental health research and professionals, increase funding for school security without taking it away from the funds for education.
And these are all pretty common sense
Very
things.
common sense and makes so much sense, and it just seems ridiculous.
Yeah, that they're not enacted
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, so a very well-written article, and this came from The Guardian,
Yeah.
but you can find it pretty much anywhere online.
Yeah, The Guardian is a good source. Right, and then talking about on the same page, talking about how important it is to vote and how important it is to register to vote.
You can register at 16. It's called pre-registration.
That's right. Yeah, and so even though you may not be able to vote until you're 18, still you're in the pipeline, and it gets kids thinking about issues and having an idea as to what they would vote on when they finally get the chance to do it. Registering to vote is critical. Right now, there's a primary coming up on June 5th, and there are folks who are running for election in those races. I don't believe there are any initiatives. I haven't heard of any initiatives.
Yeah.
But
the League of Women Voters would know.
they certainly would. And so there is. This is a great article on what you should be doing in terms of getting ready to vote. And if you're not already registered, which you probably are if you're listening to this, but please encourage other people to vote. This is Bruce Giudici along with Christie Kelley. We're getting through our Connections April-May 2018 edition. It's really the Earth Day edition. We're celebrating Earth Day on April 22nd, the actual Earth Day this year, Sunday in Victory Park. Festivities start at 9 o'clock with yoga, and then 10 o'clock is the March for Science. 11 to 4 is when the festival itself happens with entertainment and vegetarian food. And it's free admission, family friendly. It's going to be a great event, and from what I heard, the weather is going to be perfect. So you got to come along, got to do it. Anyway, then we go on to page 4, and we talk about the tunnels and read more about the tunnels. The thing is, the tunnels, the news changes on a daily basis. So this is good background to talk about how decisions are being moved towards the south and towards the water districts that are deciding whether or not they can afford to build these tunnels. Like I said, the breaking news is that the Metropolitan Water District down in LA is trying to get other water districts down there to come up with the $11 billion I think it's going to take to build these things. And then once they've built them, the water is essentially theirs. And so in a world where water is going to be scarce, they would have essentially bought themselves a gold mine, similar to when they drained the Owens River Valley. And I don't know if you've ever been up to the Owens River Valley over by Bishop and Independence, but it is just a dusty mess. And it is white alkali soil. What used to be a very nice farming community is now a desert. So we don't want that future for where we live. So, and then there's some other discussion here on this page 4. Since this is the environmental issue, we put more environmental stuff up front, talking about toxic waste pollution in California, and then also just the dangerous decline in biodiversity that threatens humanity's well-being worldwide. Again, talking about things like the Delta smelt or other animals that are going extinct, and we're seeing that more and more animals throughout the food chain, up and down, are just disappearing. and the future with climate change and with habitat destruction and human overpopulation. These trends cannot continue. We have to address them, and we are still a very well-off and rich nation. A lot of times, the cost to keep a species alive would be the cost of finding somebody a job, rather than having them try to keep their family whole by killing an endangered wildebeest or something. There's just, the cost to maintain these habitats is tiny compared to how invaluable they are.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah. So read it on page 4, and then on page 5 we're talking about healthcare.
Healthcare.
And that's normally the healthcare page, and we're talking about how private insurance is a major culprit in keeping us from being able to access decent healthcare. And there's just a lot of costs that are being hidden from us, so we really don't know when we are being charged $3,000 for that pill or $5,000 for that procedure. We may think that we're getting a great deal when we only have to pay $500 out of the $5,000 charge, but that $4,500 of insurance isn't just free. It ends up being paid for by insurance, and then when your insurance rate goes up by 10%, you find out that you can't afford to cover your child, and then when that child gets ill, you're in trouble.
You're in trouble. This is a interview of Margaret Flowers by Janine Jackson on Counterspin.
Yeah.
And so
Counterspin's excellent.
Yeah, it makes good reading because it's questions and answers, and it's probably questions you may have.
Yeah, so please take a look at it. Single payer is the way most countries in this world deal with their healthcare needs, and this country is going to get there sooner or later. It just depends on how much cost we have to endure before we get there.
And we have our sponsors: Pacific Complementary Medicine Center, internal medicine, acupuncture, herbs, health exercises, all available at Pacific Complementary Medicine Center on Harding Way, 645 West Harding. And Audubon. Join your Audubon chapter. They're a good group that is proactive on the environment, and they really have fun birding outings.
Yeah, and we've had them on the show a couple times. It's really great how many birds we have coming through here.
It's amazing how many birds we have coming through.
Yeah, yeah.
And then David Best Remodeling Services. They've been great supporters of Connections.
They were the folks who remodeled this or created this radio station space that we're in right now. Very nice. So then the pages 6 and 7 are talking about foreign policy and about some of the concerns that a lot of people are having about some of the recent appointees, John Bolton in particular, for National Security Advisor. That's a very scary person to be in charge of providing or being the last word that Donald Trump hears about what he should be doing about problems like Korea or Venezuela or whatever problems that they dream up. There's just not a lot of diplomacy or diplomatic sense in the White House right now. And so it's a very concerning thing when we're talking about tactical nuclear weapons. And here we're talking about somebody who was right in the forefront of advocating going into Iraq and looking for those weapons of mass destruction and for bombing Iran and for getting out of the Iran nuclear deal. And there's just a lot of concern about that whole process that's happening. So foreign policy-wise, it's a good read. And then there's on page 7, there was a discussion finally of there was finally a congressional hearing on whether or not we should be continually going to war since 9/11. There had not been a congressional hearing on the authorization for the use of military force since the 2011.
16 years.
16 years.
16 years.
And finally, there was a congressional hearing on it. Of course, the authorization of doing a new authorization was not approved. so they're continuing under the same old authorization of the war on terror that George W. Bush got passed through. But there's still the tide is slowly turning, where people are saying, is war the only way we can go about solving our problems?
And you're going to hear a lot of talk on mass media that it is.
Yes.
And we need to continually read and educate ourselves about what are the alternatives and why this isn't the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, we have to look at Syria. I mean, when right now there's today and yesterday there are reports of chemical weapons use in Syria on civilians, and essentially in this case, what Syria uses for chemical weapons are huge drums full of chlorine dropped on populations, which is a use of chemicals to really injure people. And it is despicable, it's wrong, and but going in and bombing folks, I don't know if that's necessarily going to stop or to keep this from happening, because we've done it before, and it does, doing two wrongs do not make a right. And I can't see how how doing that sort of reaction is going to stop a regime that is doing this sort of thing. So there has to be some sort of more diplomacy. The unfortunate thing is that our country has decimated its diplomatic staff, and we really don't have any diplomats to send in to negotiate a peaceful ending. What we have is John Bolton, unfortunately.
Right.
So it's a concern. But at least we had a congressional hearing on it, and I think Congress is waking up that we have to rein in the administration, or else we're going to end up being in a war that we don't want to be in.
This page is a large article on how the Trump administration has been quietly dismantling Obama's family planning policy, which is of huge concern on many levels.
Yes. So I mean, the Obama administration was working on making certain that people had access to contraceptives and even to abortion services. And now the Trump administration is going back to the same old abstinence types of policies that are pushed by, the evangelical right and folks who don't want to deny women their choice. So anyway, it's a good long article, and on the facing page, also talking about women's rights and talking about Trump appointee pushes reproductive policies that are worse than Saudi Arabia's, and so the advisor. This advisor to USAID's Office of Gender Equality told national delegations that the United States is a pro-life country and pushed for the elimination of the term modern contraceptives. And so a lot of people are sort of shocked when the United States comes out with statements like that from governmental officials, because this country is not, well, we all like life, but we are not all anti-choice. And so yeah, so that term pro-life is, to me, is just such a misnomer. Everybody is pro-life.
Everybody is.
Yeah. It's women need choices. And then climate change impacts women more than men, and that's that's discussing how this occurs not just in the United States but in less developed countries, and in many countries where women do most of the work, in terms of when firewood becomes farther or when water becomes more scarce, women are the ones who have to go greater distances to find that water and to find that firewood. And so women are the ones who bear the brunt. So
this is the page that has the contact your reps.
Yes.
So phone numbers, emails of the president, senators, representatives, governor, state senators, and your assembly person. They're all here.
So if you're concerned about any of these issues, you can write, call, email your representatives and let them know what you think, because really they are your employees. You know, they handle your money. They make decisions on what sort of laws we're going to be held accountable to, and so please contact them. This is Bruce Giudici with Christie Kelley. Kelley Christie.
Whatever.
That's right, however it's spelled. And so we're discussing the most recent Peace and Justice Connections issue. This is the Earth Day issue. Earth Day is again Sunday, April 22nd from 11 to 4. It's a free event. Bring your family. It's going to be a great time. On pages 10 and 11, we're talking about money and about government money and about...
Is that why you have the Connections advertised with us information? Because Connections does need money. We're totally volunteer.
That's right.
We totally depend on donations and advertisers.
Yeah.
So this is your opportunity to check out how much an ad costs and support us and get your business or organization out there.
A business card ad is only $46 for every issue, and these issues are bi-monthly, so they hang around for a couple months. And so for $23 a month, that's a pretty darn good deal.
And we print how many?
And we print 7,000 for this issue.
And they go out all over the community, and we mail them free to
1,700 people.
1,700 people.
Yeah. And so it's a shoestring operation. None of us gets paid for this. And but we do appreciate your support, because a lot of this information, although some of it is kind of concerning, it's information that really everybody should know about.
And you're not going to get it too many other places unless you are going online or have other alternative newspapers.
That's right. And what you should be doing also is, when you're reading these articles, take a look at the end, because generally there is a pretty much all the time I'm seeing here I'm missing a source here.
Yeah.
But generally the sources are at the bottom of every article, and so you can go to these sources and find more information, and it's good credible information that that you can see where their sources are and verify it and see that the information that's here is in many different newspapers, credible newspapers, taking the place of some of the fake news that people are decrying these days. So, so what we have
Money page.
Yeah, so we're on page 10. We're talking about outrageous. Over half of the $1.3 trillion budget is headed for more war making.
Over half.
Over half of the $1.3 trillion. So we're talking about $650 billion, $650,000 million that is going towards the military. And this is at a time when we are, well, I guess we are at war in a couple places, but we don't have to be at war in those places. The reason why we're at war in those places is because, for the same reason why we throw money away at healthcare, is because we can, is because we allow it, is because we allow our representatives to vote for this wasteful spending when we can't figure out how to come up with the money to come up with a single payer system, and yet we can come up with 650 over. The final deal contains $700 billion in military and war spending. $700 billion.
What they could do if it went to elementary education.
Even half. Even half. I mean, we are not the
child care centers.
The amount that we spend on our military compared to everybody else in the world is outrageous. And yet there is still a cry that somehow we are short. Somehow we're impotent. Somehow we can't keep up with other countries. It's a lie. This is the amount of money we spend is just astounding. And then on the same page, spending bill continues to leave dreamers behind. So when the spending bill went through, which was thought of as being a must-pass bill, and it was something that the Democrats said that they were going to fight tooth and nail for, they still allowed it through because of the $700 billion might have gone to the military. Well, $600 billion went to other spending needs that they thought were more important than keeping the dreamers in this country. And so they essentially were bought off.
Right.
And the Democrats had nothing to do with the tax bill that cut our ability to pay for these costs, but they did have a lot to do with getting this thing through, because they could have stopped this bill in its tracks.
They could have.
And they decided not to.
Thank you to Dr. Lang, dentist, 3031 West March Lane, for supporting us.
He's my dentist.
He's been a great dentist and a great supporter of Connections. Thank you.
Guy. Yeah. So then on the facing page, we have mainstream media sources or not alternative media sources on the right hand side, and so these are places that you can go to take a look and see if find some different perspectives on the news. And what we're also talking about here is more about the military spending, about the $30 million for Trump's vanity military parade is nothing compared to the $5.6 trillion spent on endless war since 2001. So this is just taking up the same argument of how much money we are throwing at the military. It's another perspective because it looks at the amount of money we spent on the military over the last 17 years, $5.6 trillion. $5.6 trillion is a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of countries that will never, ever see $5.6 trillion. That's amazing. So anyway, so it's a concern. And then on the bottom, as Trump threats stir global arms race, new report details the nuclear war profiteers. And so
somebody's making money
this
off
talks
of that.
about this talks about the individual corporations that are making tons of money off this military bonanza. So that is your military financial report for the 2 months.
So there's a great little, let's go to something a little bit more positive here.
Page 12 is normally our sustainable ag page,
which is great, and you can learn how to garden. And much more. The Boggs Track Community Farm hosts a variety of instructional workshops throughout the year, and April, May, all the way through December, we have different workshops on herbs, healing, that's hard to say, healing herbs,
Healing herbs, yes.
Pizza oven and kitchen use. The pizza oven they have out there is amazing. Composting and vermiculture, that's using worms.
Worms, yes.
Natural pest management, cooking demonstrations, all about corn, caring for chickens, perennial vegetables, and canning and preserving.
That's for the whole year.
It's great. They're wonderful workshops, and you get to
Monthly
get out there on the
workshops.
farm in Boggs Track. And then...
Looks like it's the third Sunday.
Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah. And then Shane Zerligan from Puentes Farm has a really good little article on how to get ready for summer, getting your seeds started, testing your soil, and cleaning and sharpening your tools.
He writes nice stuff. I like his stuff.
Yeah, very practical.
Yeah. And then there's an article here about California courts block state agricultural department from spraying pesticides, which is quite a change. It's a win for environmental and public health advocates. Yeah. And so, because a lot of people are concerned about the number of pesticides and chemical fertilizers that are applied to their foods.
And a lot of people are not aware of how much pesticides is applied and what foods absorb those pesticides, and that they're consuming even when they wash their fruit or vegetables. So that's a great win.
Yeah, because the ruling cited the state's woefully deficient analysis of the cumulative danger of increasing the more than 150 million pounds of pesticides already used in California each year. 150 million pounds. That's a lot of stuff that ends in the word "side," which means kill. So pesticides.
So this next page, I read the replacing original windows, a big mistake, and that couldn't have come at a better time. My house was built in 1921. It has the original windows, and now I know I've agonized over replacing them because I love the way they look.
Yes.
And now I know all I need to do is make sure that they're insulated correctly, and they're just fine.
Yeah. Yeah, because there'll be somebody coming along door to door trying to sell your vinyl windows or whatever. And Robert Oakes, who's a local who lives here locally and has put in some articles about Strodes and such. And here he came up with this one, which was really nice, very practical, and real interesting.
And if anybody disagrees with him, send a letter to the editor. I'd like to hear your side, but I sure do like his side.
That's right. It's very interesting. It's great. And then on the same page talks about the judges. There's a federal judge that okayed waiving environmental laws to build the U.S.-Mexico border wall. So one of the concerns about the border wall that Trump wants to put up is that there's going to be some major environmental damage of animals that go between the two countries and blocking migration trails and so and here the judge is saying, well, it's okay to waive those things because national security is so darn important.
Oh my gosh, I'm just having a hard time with this one because the species that they mention are bison, pronghorn, bighorn sheep, bears, foxes, salamanders, and some bird species, and it's just already our roads and highways interrupt that flow. Yeah, it's just insult to injury building that wall.
Yeah, it's there's just a lot of fronts on which our country is moving that really has to be addressed. And you can contact your representatives. They're listed in this paper. They are your employees, and you can talk to them and in California, we do have 2 Democratic senators who would be more than willing to listen to your arguments on this border wall, because a lot of the funding for the border wall has to go through both houses, and if there's no funding, it won't happen. And so right now, it's really not happening. $1.5 billion, even though that's a lot of money, was approved towards doing the border wall in that huge spending bill we talked about just a couple pages ago. But it's not for the big border wall that Trump said that Mexico was going to build. So right now it's stalled, but the foundation is being laid when judges like this are saying that it's okay to waive environmental rules so that it can be built. So anyway. Moving on to page 14, we're talking about is the American dream over for black boys? And this is written by a professor in Chicago, I believe. Yeah, in Chicago, and is
this is nothing new for educators. This is
citing the demise.
The ongoing problem and the cultural disconnect that teachers have worked with often, but young black youth in elementary school and middle school and high school are getting left behind often, and a lot of it has to do with disconnect in terms of culture and how we interact with each other. One of the suggestions is that teachers need to be aware of what they're seeing and hearing and not take it as insult or disrespectful behavior, but try to understand where these young boys are coming from when they're in a setting that isn't connected to them culturally. And so this, just as an example of how hard teachers work, this is one of the things that if you're not made aware of this, you come home frustrated because you don't understand why you're not making it. And not to say that the kids go home frustrated and end up being disciplined in ways that are beyond what is appropriate, what would be used with other children. Right. So it's a really good article that discusses the levels of this disconnect in the schools and how it impacts the black children.
We just have to start caring for people, and start understanding rather than blaming.
Right.
And just understanding where people are coming from and taking people for the way they are. And
it's part of the school to prison pipeline because of this disconnect.
Yeah.
And so taking money away from education rather than supporting teacher education and supporting having extra services such as counselors and building that social connection so that everybody can have equal access to the education that's out there.
It means putting resources into public schools.
Absolutely.
When you starve, when you starve a school system of funds, so all you can afford is to have one teacher in a classroom of 30 people, and treating all those 30 people as if those 30 students as if they're all the same, they all have they're all coming ready to learn and all have everything going on perfectly for them at home, there is no support system for counselors or for psychologists or for discussion, and when a child acts up, the first reaction is, oh, we're just going to suspend him. We're just going to get him out of the classroom.
And research shows that the black children are suspended and disciplined at twice the rate as white.
right.
So there's something wrong.
There is something wrong.
And teachers are working as hard as they can, but many teachers need more tools, and those tools are gotten through professional development.
Yeah.
And if that's not available,
You need support. I mean,
Yeah.
you need more staff. And in California, I mean, this is coming from Chicago. California is does not fund its teachers. It does not fund its education. There is just a lot more resources that have to be brought to bear, because really these are investments in our future. And if we don't invest in our future, we're going to pay the cost.
and is it the Oklahoma teachers that are on the 6th day of their strike,
Yeah.
I think, or 9th
Yeah.
day? That go teachers.
Yeah.
That's a
Well,
direct action.
Well, Oklahoma, Nebraska, West
Nothing else
Virginia,
is
those
working.
places are just chronically, I mean, they've been notorious for, not Kansas, notorious for underfunding their
Mm-hmm.
educational system. They're saying they got a 15% increase, and they say it's not enough, and I believe them.
It's not yeah.
I believe them.
Yeah.
The next page is talking about healthcare again, and we're talking about a Trump appointee who is his claim to fame is to say no to healthcare and to disallow or to keep people from using their healthcare rights, using their healthcare, and of course that saves money for the system. But the problem is that it doesn't result in good healthcare.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a good article. The next few pages are talking about, on page 16, we're talking about actually the senators actually held a vote to end the illegal U.S. war in Yemen, which was where we're funneling money to Saudi Arabia, and they are using that money to bomb civilians in Yemen. And it's essentially a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And so the United States is fueling that by giving a lot of money to Saudi Arabia. 44 senators took a vote to stop that war, to stop providing those funds, and 44 is pretty darn, is quite a few. So of course in the House it would probably not, it wouldn't fly, but at least the senators are making a history by holding the vote. And then the bottom pages are talking about what the atrocities that are happening in Israel and Palestine. And one talks about boycotts and boycotting Israel in the same way that the United States people were boycotting South Africa to get Israel to stop their brutality against the Palestinian people. And on the article right next to it is Israel passes a law to strip residency of Jerusalem's Palestinians, and as if people have been keeping track of this, Jerusalem is a major source of contention between Palestinians and Israelis.
And now Palestinians in their own country have to carry cards that say that they have a permanent residency ID cards, as opposed to the Israelis who are just citizens.
Right.
So sounds like history repeating itself.
Yeah, it's moving towards Israel supporters don't like to hear it, but they have to realize that this looks, smells, and sounds like apartheid, and it's wrong, and it's immoral, and Israel should really know this. It's just wrong. On the facing page, talking about there are some cabinet appointees that Trump is putting out there, and there is the CIA director Mike Pompeo, who is a representative, I believe, from Kansas, who was moved up into the CIA position, is now being thought of as being the nominee for Secretary of State, and this is sort of the bookend to the John Bolton National Security Advisor appointee, except this one, Pompeo goes as a Secretary of State, he has to be confirmed by the Senate. And so Dianne Feinstein is is a person who is on this committee, who will be making recommendations, and hard questions should be asked about this guy. He was approved by for the CIA, but it was a very, very close vote. And the CIA is a very different beast from the Secretary of State. The top diplomat should be actually a diplomat, not a spy. And so you ought to read this article and maybe give good old Diane Feinstein a call.
Give her a call, support her. Shout out to Leland Nelson Realty.
Yes.
2222 Pacific Avenue, a great supporter, and the law offices of Ann Cerny, Shelley Lott, and Langley Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
And court companies, thank you guys. Robert Oakes at Realtor Court Companies, thank you for supporting Connections.
Robert Oakes is the guy who wrote the Windows article.
And then the SCT, the Stockton Civic Theater, is playing Dead Man's Cell Phone by Sarah Rule. I think she's a local.
Yeah, I gotta check
April
that out.
25th through May 12th.
Excellent. And then the top page, the top article on page 17 talks about the 15th anniversary of going to war in Iraq, and it is a very touching discussion or essay by somebody who is married to an Iraq veteran and whose life has been changed forever by that war and that discussion how that changed her husband and changed their family's lives.
And we get back to page 18 and 19, which begins our calendar and activities that are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So there's Nature Journaling with John Muir Laws, May 16th and 17th. And then April, a Green Fashion Show.
April 13th, that's
April
coming up just around the next few days.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And then David Fries wrote something about local opportunities for people to come along with the San Joaquin Audubon chapter. And
thank you, Audubon. Even though we forgot your ad this month, you do support us. Thank you.
We do love you. And so, and there's a nice little listing there of the different field trips and hikes that have happened from April 7th through April 29th. So check it out. And then there's
join KXVS. Become a member.
Your community radio station.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. And we're getting ready to go on the air. So be one of those that gets in before we're on the air and says, we supported you.
That's right. And check out our calendar. And
lots
so,
of stuff.
Lots of stuff. So anyway, so that is Connections in a nutshell. It's an hour-long nutshell.
That's a big nutshell.
That's right, a big nutshell. April-May edition. This is the Earth Day edition. Again, we are going to be out at Victory Park on April 22nd. 9 o'clock kicks off the day with some yoga.
Come do some yoga.
And then come March for Science from 10 to 11, and then the festival starts from 11 and goes till 4 in the afternoon. It's a free event. It's the 30th annual event that's been supported by the city and by Peace and Justice Network and by people like you. I got an email from somebody who said, believe it or not, I've been to every Earth Day that you've had since the beginning, since my daughter was a young girl, and now she's like, I don't know, she's like 35 or something. So it's great to hear stories like that people say, well, they wouldn't miss this event. And so it's always in as close as we can get to the real Earth Day, and this one is going to be actually on April 22nd, the National Earth Day. So we look forward to seeing you out there.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is Bruce Giudici with Christie Kelley.
Yep.
Peace and Justice Connections Radio. Thanks for listening.